Hello everyone, I'm Nagendra Kumar Maur and I'm happy to share our research work entitled Does Development Lead to Happiness? This is a joint research work with my colleague from the department, Dr. Karma Shankar Kanoji. First of all, I am very grateful to the organizer for providing us this global platform to share our research work with the global audience. There has been an emerging debate that economic progress should not essentially be limited to the quantitative rise in economic indicators, but it should also focus on improving the quality of well-being and quality of standard of living. Based on this fact, the common notion that happiness is monotonically an increasing function of economic progress may not be axiomatically true. The famous finding that wealthy people tend to be happier than poorer ones within countries, but that there is no such relationship among countries or over time, has since been supported by a number of subsequent studies, and it is also known as Easterlin Paradox. Since then, many researchers are trying to explain this Easterlin Paradox with the help of adequate data set. Recently, Easterlin, on the basis of his analysis of 17 developed, 9 developing, 11 transition, and 17 Latin American countries, again concluded that there is no convincing substantiation that economic growth leads to increased happiness. And in that work, he further remarked that studies reporting positive association between these two on the basis of time series data were basically based on short time series. And he said that the findings based on short time series should not be should not be confused with findings on the basis of long time series data. So according to us, in fact, the whole debate about the relationship between economic growth and happiness revolves around two important aspects, two important issues. One is measurement issue of economic growth and happiness, conceptual issues related with the economic growth and happiness. And second is the evidences of relationship which are coming, evidences of relationship between economic growth and happiness, which are coming from cross-sectional data and time series data. Let us put our arguments one by one. The first argument is between development versus growth. We argue that growth means, or the growth indicates pace of change in economic progress, whereas level of development indicates current standard of economic progress or standard of living, which is the cumulative effect of previous year's growth. And we have seen that most of the studies exploring linkages between happiness or well-being and economic progress mainly took growth in per capita GDP as an indicator of economic progress. However, we argue that level of development should be the preferred indicator for measuring economic progress, because level of development is the reflection of past policy efforts and pace of structural changes. And that is why we argue that level of development is more important than pace of development for the purpose of establishing relationship between happiness and economic progress. Second argument, although we primarily believe that level of development is more important than the economic growth, but we also argue that long episodes of growth are having better can have better relationship, can have better association with the short episodes of growth. Means developing countries may further be divided into emerging economies, which are experiencing long episodes of substantial economic growth, like India and China, and other developing countries which are not having that much high growth rate in their economies. So our basic argument is that slow economic growth is not sufficient to bring measurable changes in happiness. The reason is that people consider lower economic growth as insignificant from the perspective of making changes in their standard of living, and that is why they attach lower happiness weight to the lower economic growth. On the other hand, we feel that economic growth over and above a critical minimum level is considered significant, and the by the people of the country, and they perceive that that long episodes of economic growth will bring large happiness benefits. And that is why we may find that nations experiencing long episodes of high economic growth may also have means significant rise in happiness levels. And third argument, that as I told you, that most of the countries which are trying to explore the relationship between happiness and economic progress have basically utilized either cross-sectional data set or a time series data set. In this paper, we are diverging from these existing study, and we are trying to explore the relationship between happiness and development by taking the evidences from the cross-sectional as well as the panel data. So given this background, in this paper we have basically tried to the objective of the study, or the main question which we have asked, is does development lead to happiness? And we have tried to analyze the data to answer this particular question in this paper. So for the purpose of study, the selected variables, the dependent variable is happiness, which has been based through the happiness index from World Happiness Report, published by the Sustainable Development Solutions Network, a global initiative for the United Nations. And the level of economic progress has been measured through per capita real GDP. And the other control variables for our study are Human Development Index, Trade GDP ratio, unemployment, and income inequality. These other explanatory variables have been selected on the basis of this intensive literature review, which is mentioned in this slide. And the data source, we have collected data for 125 countries for the period of 2012 to 2016. Actually, the number of countries for each selected variable was varying from 156 to 206. But out of these 206 countries, we have found 125 common countries for which data for all the variables for the selected time period was available. So data for economic variables, that is per capita real GDP, income inequality, unemployment, these have been collected from the World Bank's annual publication, that is World Development Indicators. And the happiness index score and the human development index score were collected from the World Happiness Report and the UNDP Human Development Reports, respectively. So let us talk about the findings of our analysis. So first of all, this is descriptive statistics of our selected variables. And from this descriptive statistics, we can clearly see that per capita real GDP growth rate is highly volatile. The degree of volatility is very high. The coefficient of variation is 140.39. On the other hand, if you look at the happiness index and SDI, they are comparatively stable as compared to per capita real GDP growth rate. Happiness index and SDI, these are basically life satisfaction measures, well-being measures, and this shows that changes in well-being measures and life satisfaction measures take a longer time perspective as compared to other variables. So if you also see that per capita real GDP is also quite stable for our selected time period. That means life satisfaction or well-being measures may have better relationship with level of development rather than the pace of development. This also in this slide we have presented our correlation matrix, and we can see that happiness index is statistically correlated with all the explanatory variables except per capita real GDP growth rate. The degree of correlation is poor as well as statistically insignificant. And on the other hand, if you see that the association with per capita real GDP, which is an indicator of level of development, is highly significant and is positively correlated with happiness index. That means if the level of development is increasing, the happiness index, the happiness level is also rising. We have applied panel data regression, pooled. So the regression results are presented here. We have applied pooled OLS and random effect model, that as our test statistics preferred random effect model over fixed effect models. And if you see that, then log per capita real GDP comes out to be an important determinant of happiness index. Here we have actually estimated three models. Model 1 takes log per capita real GDP and SGI as explanatory variables. In model 2, we have added unemployment as the regressor, and in model 3, we have taken all the explanatory variables. And similarly for random effect models as well. But if you see that two variables are found to be highly significant in all forms of in all models. One is log per capita real GDP, which is an indicator of level of development, and second is unemployment. So that means that it shows that level of development is really affecting and is really affecting the level of happiness, and can be used for predicting or estimating level of happiness across the countries. Second is unemployment, and unemployment having inverse association or inverse relationship with the happiness index, and the estimated coefficients are statistically significant too. It also shows that job security, flow of income is also important. So a person having job security and an adequate amount of income flow will be able to will have a chance to arrange for his choice of goods and services, and that is why he will be happier than the other people who are not having job security or a regular flow of income. So our pooled regression results show that level of development is found to be an important and statistically significant determinant for level of happiness. However, we have also tried to measure the relationship with the change means with the pace of development and with the change in other explanatory variables. The presented and the results are shown here in the form of a scatter plot matrix. So if you see that none of them are showing any pattern. You can see the per capita real GDP growth rate with happiness index, change in human development index with happiness index, trade GDP ratio, unemployment, and income inequality. All of them are not showing any clear sign of association, whether positive or negative. We have also tried to run panel data econometrics, panel data regression, and there too we have found no associations and no significant result between happiness and other explanatory variables, and that is why we are not presenting those results here. However, as we have argued that the quantum of pace of change is also an important issue. So we have calculated average growth rate of year-on-year average growth rate of all the selected countries for the given time period to avoid year-on-year fluctuations. And after calculating mean growth rate of each country for the given time period, that is 2012 to 2016, we have classified countries into two groups: the countries which have achieved average growth rate of 3% or more, and the countries which have achieved average growth rate of 3% and less. So we have found that 43 countries have achieved a 3% growth rate and more, and the mean growth rate for 43 countries comes out to be 4.33%, and the corresponding happiness change in happiness index comes out to be 5.10%. However, remaining 78 countries which have recorded less than 3% average growth rate, their mean growth rate is 0.83%, and the corresponding growth in happiness is minus 2.39%. So here once again our basic argument that the growth rate beyond a critical minimum level is an important determinant for making changes in happiness also proved here. And if we increase the cutoff from 3% to 4%, then there are 19 countries which have received more than which have recorded more than 4% mean growth rates, 4% average growth rate, and their mean growth rate is 5.43%, and the corresponding growth rate in happiness is 5.73%. So from these, and these differences are statistically significant too. The statistics is available in our full text papers, which is uploaded on the website of the on our conference website. So our argument that growth rate beyond a critical minimum level is important to bring significant changes in happiness level is proved from this analysis. So our findings based on panel data have shown that growth does not necessarily explain the level of happiness. It is better explained by level of development. However, we have also found the strong evidences in support of our hypothesis that growth rate in per capita real income above a critical level causes significant positive rise in happiness. So this is from our side. Thank you.